In the book Fire and Blood, the character of Helaena Targaryen is forced to make a terrible decision. One night, she and her children are ambushed by two strange men that have snuck their way into the Red Keep. The young mother is then ordered to make a choice no parent should ever have to make. Helaena must decide which one of her sons will die and which will live. This is the infamous Blood and Cheese incident. House of the Dragon Season 2 recently had its season premiere. The episode A Son for a Son features the Blood and Cheese incident. While the adaptation of the event is as horrific as it sounds, the show radically changes what makes the Blood and Cheese incident so deeply disturbing. It strips away several key details that lessens the level of the tragedy. It also leaves out and goes against many of the key themes present in the source material. In the books, Blood and Cheese is a graphic, violent, senseless act of revenge. On the show, the incident is presented as a misguided, poorly planned attempt at enacting justice. Let's discuss. Starting with the differences between the book and the show. In the books, Helaena Targaryen has 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, Jaehaerys, Jaehaera, and Maelor. Daemon Targaryen ordered the assassination of one of the boys in revenge for the death of Rhaenyra's son, Lucerys. A son for a son. Daemon never specifies to Blood and Cheese which one he wants dead. All that matters is that one of them dies. Blood and Cheese decide on their own to make Helaena make the choice. And not only does it fall on her to choose, the terrified young mother must watch it happen. She must live with the guilt of her actions. Alicent Hightower is also present for the incident and is affected in similar ways. Alicent in the books is much different than she is on the show. In the books, Alicent is an active co-conspirator in the plot to steal Rhaenyra's throne. She doesn't support Rhaenyra in the least. In the show, Helaena only has 2 children, Jaehaerys and Jaehaera. On the night of the incident, Helaena is taken at knife point by the assassin known as Cheese. Blood and Cheese has been sent by Daemon to kill Aemon Targaryen, but the two cannot find him in the Red Keep, so they decide to kill one of Helena's children instead. On the show, Alicent is not present for the incident. She is off doing other things. They find Helaena and the children in a bedchamber. The children, in this case, are asleep. Helaena appears to have been watching over them. When confronted by Blood and Cheese, the 2 would-be assassins are unable to determine which child is the boy and which is the girl. So Cheese demands Helaena point out the prince. Helaena must make a terrible choice, but it is not quite the same choice as her book counterparts. On House of the Dragon, the Blood and Cheese incident is all about the tragedy of a young mother being forced to decide which one of her children should die. That is Blood and Cheese at the most basic level. Oh my god, I can't believe these 2 guys made a young mother do that. But in the books, the incident is much more than that. The tragedy cuts much deeper. In the show, Helena's presence is almost unnecessary. Blood and Cheese don't really need her to figure out which child is the prince. In fact, they say as much.
They both look the same. Which one's the boy?
Maybe that one.
Well, look for a cock.
Blood doesn't even believe Helaena after she points to Jaehaerys. He thinks she's trying to trick them. He even makes a move toward the bed of Princess Jaehaera as if he would kill her instead. This isn't the psychological torture that it is in the books. This is 2 idiots bumbling around in the dark.
How do we get upstairs?
The royals live up there.
Right.
The royals live on this level.
Right.
The choice they're giving Helaena is not to menace her, it's because they are dumb. They couldn't find Aemond, Blood got spotted by a maid in panic, Cheese found Helaena by accident. What still follows is a terrible tragedy, just so. The sequence is well acted. How Helaena responds to Blood and Cheese is heartbreaking.
I have a necklace. It's of great value.
Does she have to fall on her knees and beg? Does she have to say, please don't hurt me, don't hurt my babies, take this and go, for it to be understood? Her not having a strong emotional reaction is completely in line with her character. And we can tell through dialogue and the character's facial expressions, she's having a very hard time processing what's happening.
They killed the boy.
Her expression after she says they killed the boy, that's a look of confusion. What she just said, what she just witnessed can't possibly be real, is it? And who does she look to for an answer? Her mother. And yes, Helaena is very quiet throughout the entire event. Everyone is very quiet throughout the event, from the maid to Helaena to Alicent. On my first viewing, I wanted a dramatic reaction from somebody. Helaena watching her son be murdered right in front of her reminded me of the movie It Comes at Night. Spoilers ahead for It Comes at Night. This post-apocalyptic psychological horror film ends with a young mother having her child murdered in her arms. The scream she lets out when she realizes what happened is chilling. Initially, I expected something similar from Helaena, but upon second viewing, I realized I was projecting my own feelings onto the character. Because for everything to be so muted while something so horrible is happening, there was a scream trapped in my throat. And I think that's the intention. For Helaena to have a strong emotional reaction, for her to do something like scream, I think that would be her acknowledging what happened. But despite having just witnessed it, Helaena has not processed what happened. Is her quiet no Helaena saying, don't do this, or is it her denying the reality of the event? Or is it both? It's very heartbreaking. The show's version of the events is quite good. However, it loses a lot of the impact the book version of the events has because so much of what happens by accident. The cruelty here is not wholly intentional. It's by accident. The show wants us to believe that Helaena is left with only two choices: give up her son or sacrifice her daughter to save her son. But as Cheese pointed out, they don't need her to identify the son. And even after she does, Blood doesn't believe her.
Wait. It's the other one. She's not going to give up the king's heir that easy.
So he plans to kill the other child. The goal here isn't to hurt Helaena on a deeper level. They're doing this because they are dumb. Helaena could deceive Blood and Cheese by sacrificing her daughter to save her son. And that will be interesting if that is what happened. She would have to live with the guilt of her actions, and that is a major part of what happens to her in the books. But it appears Helaena told them the truth. Jaehaerys is killed and she flees with Jaehaera as we listen to the sound of the boy being decapitated, along with the sound of his muffled screams. Because Helaena has only one son on the show leaves out a crucial detail in the Blood and Cheese incident, the cruel trick they play on her. In the books, Helaena has 3 children, Jaehaerys, Jaehaera, and Maelor. In the books, Blood and Cheese were not given a specific target. They were not told to kill Aemon Targaryen and or a son for a son. They were simply told a son for a son. Blood and Cheese don't find Helaena alone with her children. First, they find Queen Alicent and tie her up in her bedchamber, killing one of her maids in the process. Helaena and her children are then ambushed by the 2 assassins when they come to visit Alicent. Helena's guardsman is also killed. Helaena has 2 sons, but the assassins only want 1, so they extend Helaena the courtesy of choosing which boy will be killed. If she fails to make the decision fast enough, they threaten to Rhaenyra and kill all 3 children. Helaena chooses Maelor, her youngest. Cheese then leans in to whisper into Maelor's ear, "You hear that, little boy? Your mama wants you dead." Cheese then grins at Blood, and at that moment, Blood chops off Jaehaerys' head with a single swing of his sword. The 2 assassins leave with the head of Jaehaerys Targaryen. Helaena is left screaming in horror. Helena's presence here feels much more important than it does on the show. Blood and Cheese aren't asking her to choose which child dies because they can't figure it out themselves. The choice she's given isn't really a choice at all. Cruelty is the motive, not ignorance. The grin Cheese gives Blood before the beheading was a signal. This tells us they planned this out in advance. They came with the intent of not only killing one of her children, but to also psychologically torture her in the process. And not just her, but her surviving son as well. No one escapes this unscathed. Even though they were only ordered to kill one person, Blood and Cheese came with the intent of claiming multiple victims. That level of malice is lost in the show's version of events, and that malice is what makes the Blood and Cheese moment more than just a mother being forced to decide which one of her sons will be murdered. What's more, in the books, Helena's children are awake and aware of what's happening. They know the danger they are in. Maelor knows his mother marked him for death. He must live with that for the rest of his life. So must Helaena. We are told in Fire and Blood, quote, "Though Blood and Cheese had spared her life, Queen Helaena cannot be said to have survived that fateful dusk. Afterward, she would not eat nor bathe, nor leave her chambers, and she could no longer stand to look upon her son Maelor. Knowing that she named him to die, Queen Helaena sank deeper and deeper into madness, whilst the king raged and drank and raged." End quote. Alicent was also there when Jaehaerys was killed. Blood and Cheese is a result of her meddling because she is one of the reasons this whole conflict started. She lost a grandchild in part because she helped steal a throne. There is no Maelor on the show. There is no dark deception by Blood and Cheese. The psychological torture Helaena endured was lost in the adaptation. The incident on the show is a fine moment, but a lesser one as a result of the changes. Now, moving on to how the show downplayed the vengeance aspect of Blood and Cheese.
With my dragon and yours together, we can kill Vhagar and her rider. Make it a son for a son.
Daemon wants to kill Aemond. He wants to get even. But killing Aemond is not a son for a son. To get even Steven, he would have to kill Aemond's son or Aegon's son. Because killing Aemond is closer to justice than it is to vengeance. A son for a son means Daemon wants any of their male children. The point is to make the opposition feel the same pain they made you feel. And if you have to do that by causing some collateral damage, so be it. The point of this is completely lost when you have Daemon say, "I want Aemond in specific." That is not the unfocused, irrational act of vengeance. That's closer to justice. In the books, Daemon was at Harrenhal when he heard news of Lucerys' death. In response, he wrote, quote, "An eye for an eye, a son for a son, Lucerys shall be avenged." Revenge. Time and again, Martin demonstrates in this series how petty and personal vengeance can be, how it can perpetuate a cycle of violence that ends with the loss of many innocent lives. As the saying goes, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind.
I shall have one of her son's eyes in return.
But once Rhaenyra returns to Dragonstone, a son for a son quickly becomes...
I want Aemond Targaryen.
Rhaenyra wants the man responsible for her son's death. She's not seeking vengeance. She's seeking justice. Of course, that depends on the punishment she has planned for Aemond, but the point being, she has a very specific target, and that is the one that murdered her son. This signals to the audience Rhaenyra is not bloodthirsty or vengeful. It is also a way of distancing her from what happens to Jaehaerys later on. It is a way of telling the audience Rhaenyra never wanted an innocent child to die. In fact, Daemon didn't really want this to happen either. It wasn't his first choice. He sent blood and cheese to kill Aemon Targaryen. None of this is in the books. The blood and cheese incident on the show no longer has the strong theme of being about vengeance. This is a huge misstep because this series is very concerned with the themes of vengeance and justice.
If the king will not seek justice, the queen will. Sir Criston, bring me the eye of Lucerys Velaryon.
Clearly, this is not justice. This is vengeance. The writers of House of the Dragon are aware of these themes, but they downplay it for one faction while exaggerating it for the other. Maybe House of the Dragon wants to slowly build towards Rhaenyra being a mad queen full of vengeance. But if that's the case, why end season 1 like this? This felt like the show was telling us Rhaenyra is now out for blood. Anybody can get it. But it turns out, no, she just wants that one guy. Of course, we're gonna have to wait to see how Rhaenyra reacts to the news of the death. Rhaenyra may be offended that Daemon would do such a thing behind her back. She will have the measured, tempered response. Meanwhile, Aegon is going to have the irrational one. The maid that saw blood and then disappeared, hopefully she went to go find help, because if Aegon finds out she was merely hiding, he's going to fire her. And by fire her, I mean Dracarys. But the biggest flaw is that the show has the blood and cheese incident end with a sex scene. That was not the kind of climax this event needed. To wrap this all up, those that haven't read the books will no doubt find the blood and cheese incident to be the disgusting, abhorrent tragedy that it is. They will have great sympathy for Helaena and have pity for the choice she was forced to make. The show captures the essence of the event, but not all that goes with it. Meanwhile, those that have read the books might find the moment lacking, a little bit disappointing, because it's missing so much of what makes it so psychologically scarring for the characters. The show wastes time trying to make Rhaenyra into a good guy and Daemon into a not so bad guy. This was meant to be ugly vengeance. Two cold and deliberate men mentally torturing a mother before killing her child right before her very eyes. They did not stumble on her, they sought her out. She was the target the whole time. They didn't just make up a choice on the spot. They knew well in advance what they were going to do. Anyway, as for anyone criticizing the show because the scene wasn't graphic enough, that's understandable. The event was quite bloodless. When, in the books, Jaehaerys wasn't the only one killed that night. The maid that blood ran into definitely should have ended up on the kill count. But if you must needs see a child graphically decapitated on screen to feel satisfied, I don't know what to tell you. Go watch Hereditary.